Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up by me, Kindar, the Tiger Rights and Toy, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing chapter 60. Tibs rested his head against the stone. He stopped fighting the exhaustion and closed his eyes. The climb and falling of the stalagmite only had been the first of the challenges the dungeon put in his path. After a long walk in the dark, there had been blocks blocking his way, and he had to punch through them. He wanted to take them apart through essence use, but the dungeon knew which he could control and had made sure they were in the minority this time. It coated his fist with ice, earth, and corruption and hid them. The corruption helped degrade the essence that made up the block, while not interacting with his. Farron was unhappy about that realization. After that was a challenge clearly aimed at rogues. A large pit with too many spikes glinting in the light at the bottom. Columns were spread throughout the pit, ending in small platform at floor height. And if Tibs had his bracers, he would have been able to make the jumps between them. Without it, the only way he could cross was to use the beams from a stack by the side of the entrance. It was a puzzle, where he needed to find the right beam along the varying length provided to create a path from one platform to another until he made it to the other side. He suspected that if he got one wrong, he would either lose it as it fell into the pit or be in a position where he had to bring them back and start anew. There were more beams than he thought he'd need, but he had no way to know if he'd reached a point where he lost too many to make it. An added complication was the weight of the beams. From the shortest to the longest, they were all the same, and as he had to carry more and more of them over the precariously narrow beams he put down, the strain increased. The beams weren't flat, which would make walking along them a problem if not for Tib's experience walking roofs. And being able to pull earth essence from the floor to secure the ends. He lost two of the beams and watched them shatter as they hit the spikes. Shuddered the idea that was what waited for him if he wasn't careful. The loss didn't keep him from reaching the exit, but forced him to take a longer way around the platform. Then there was the talking. Val and Crowden were much more talkative than Stu and Ganny. Fortunately, other than Crowden's complaint about Tibs making it through this clever trap of theirs or that impossible challenge, they didn't talk about him or the ways they planned on stopping him. They didn't even seem to talk about the other runners trying for their audience. They were reminiscing about previous runners while he worked. That supplicant they had sent back running and crying after she'd broken a hand trying to make it through the box. That girl who had bragged about how strong she was on the way to the entrance and how she thought climbing the wall they had set before her would be easy. And it had been sad when that cleric died because he relied on his faith instead of fighting the monsters that populated the lower floors. On and on they jabbered, nearly causing Tibs to fall once as Val exclaimed that a fighter's battle they lost. At a fighter's battle they had lost, as if it was happening right now next to Tibs. He woke with a start and looked around. How long had he slept? How long had it taken him to cross the room? Unlike Stowe, there was no sense the dungeon had a schedule to keep. All the runners had entered together, and Paolo said weeks could go by before more supplicants were ready to enter. They weren't interested in feeding the dungeon, so they took the time to get them ready to reach their audience. He stood and started walking again. More blocks he needed to break, a wall he had to walk along, and nearly fell because he forgot to sense for traps in the handholds and cut his hand. Crowden had laughed, then been annoyed as he when he regained a hold and kept going. Other than adding more cuts to his hand, the previous one seemed to be healed quickly. Having clerics heal him when he left the dungeon made it hard to know if his wraps did more than keep any injuries from getting worse. Those he got while training went away quickly, but he always thought of those as minor injuries. Tibs woke up again. Oh, was he waking up for the first time? Val was going on about something, speaking loudly and quickly enough for Tibs. Val was going on about something, speaking loudly and quickly enough. It took Tibs a few seconds to assemble that another runner had just returned from their audience. He closed his eyes again, but the two of them kept on talking. Closed his eyes, but the two of them kept on talking excitedly. Why did they have to do that here and not wherever that runner was? He could only hear them if their focus was near him. The next room was a floor made of sliding tiles. He needed to move until they were in the right pattern to mark the path. If he had it wrong, they would crumble under his foot, opening into a deep chasm. Val seemed to have a thing for long falls. In the middle of his sixth attempt, his stomach loudly reminded him his last meal had been a while ago. Time to set up the fist, Val announced, and Tibs barely kept his sigh from sighing in relief. You can't do that, Val. They need to fast so they can have their... Oh, sneaky. Tibs lost track of the puzzle as he worked through what they just said, then remembered clerics used fasting to reach their audience. They might be so set in their ways that dungeon forgot the high emotions were the actual reliable trigger. But our plan still worked against Tibs. It had taken him 9 days without eating to have his audience with darkness. How long would it take him to have one with purity if he ate? Tibs didn't usually reach strong emotions normally. What? Tibs didn't usually reach strong emotion normally. Okay. Tibs didn't usually reach strong emotions. How long would it... So he didn't know if it would happen. Or you need to adjust him. He put Crowder and Val out of his mind and had to restart his attempt from the start. It took him 3 more before he had the path to leave the room. He was assaulted by smells. Spices, sweets, meats and breads, oils and char. His mouth watered before he looked toward the table laden with food. Cakes and breads, platters of meats and vegetables, bottles of drinks, tankard of ales. It was indeed a feast. One that, if still ever recreated, would have people clamoring to do runs just for the chance to look at it, let alone taste what the smells promised. Tibs quietly cursed the dungeon for how close the table he needed to be as he headed for the next room. Halls were supposed to be safe places. He had a tankard in hand before he realized it, and his throat constricted as he forced himself to put it down. Val could put a noble to shame with her cruelty. How could she claim purity as her main element and do this? Come on, Reverend Cood, you have to be hungry. Just one bite. It's the best Val ever made. Trust me on that. He made fist and walked to the next challenge as she laughed. This one forced him to lift and push, beams out of his way until he reached the other side, where, exhausted, he was confronted with a puzzle on the door. A square with 1 and 5 tiles on it, leaving an empty space. 1 and 5 tiles on it, leaving 1 empty space. It was a sliding puzzle like the one in the previous room, but each tile had a scene drawn with multiple creatures on them. Val was no artist, was not the artist Stowe was. He had no idea what the creature was supposed to be, or what the pattern what the pattern one was. He slid them around aimlessly for a time, wondering if they would fall in the right order before his exhaustion, thirst, or hunger caused him to have his audience. When he noticed the detail, he felt like hitting his head on the puzzle. The exhaustion had to be the reason he missed such an obvious one. No two scenes had the same number of creatures on them. Not only that, but they made out the first 1 and 5 numbers. So the answer was clear. He needed to arrange them in order. Getting them there in his state, even with his practice working the one in the other rooms. He groaned when the smell enveloped him as the door opened, and he forced himself against the wall away from the table to avoid temptation, or his fingers moving for the food on their own. He'd considered taking a nap there, but now he might end up eating something in his sleep. The next room, and another puzzle on the door. A square with 9 space on it, and 9 tiles on the table he had to put in them. "You're done," Karen had said in satisfaction. Each tile had a number from 1 to 9 on it. He placed them in order. "How?" Karen demanded. "How can you read the numbers? There's no way he's from around here." "Rugs are clever," Val replied. "He probably studied them because he was coming here." Tibs silently thanked Karina for teaching him. Them in order wasn't the solution. He noticed the arrow etched on the side of the square pointing inward, marking each line in diagonal as being important. This time he rested his head against the door and cursed. He was too tired for this. It wouldn't be only numbers. This had to be some form of calculation. Without a number as the answer marked anywhere on the door in the room, or on the door or the room, the answer would have to be self-evident within the puzzle and relate to the arrows. That boy should go strangle Val. It took him a long time, once snapping awake as his head touched the door's cool stone, to work out the answer. The floor had lines on it where Tibs had used them once he ran out of fingers to count on. 1 and 5 was the answer. It was possible to put a 9 number in the square so that each line gave him 1 and 5 as the answer. He was done after this, he promised himself. He was never doing numbers again. Karina could scream at him as loud as she wanted. He was done. "Oh, come on!" Cursed and smelled the food. Karen laughed. Tibs snapped awake because of the pain in his stomach. Again, he hadn't meant to sleep, not with food so close. But again, he hadn't eaten anything in his sleep. His stomach made sure to remind him of that. He tried to recall how many times he'd slept to equate them to how many days he had been in the dungeon, but couldn't. There were times when he couldn't even tell if he'd been dreaming of being in the dungeon or awake. He was definitely awake now, but he didn't want to be. He closed his eyes and woke. He'd woken up without having eaten enough now. He thought it was safe, and being able to think would help him ensure he survived the ruins. Then, "You remember what she did?" Karen said excitedly, her voice increasing as if she was walking in his direction. "She threw herself off the ledge!" Val replied as if it was a revelation. He groaned, as if the smell of food wasn't enough to make sleep difficult. Now dose to it to show up. The quiet had been so nice recently. "Yes, she was almost there. I could tell. All she had to do was make her way across, and I know Purdy would have been waiting for her." "Purdy so was," Val said, her tone turning sober. "But there's no returning from that embrace." Then there was a sorcerer, and on they went. He wanted to scream at them to shut up, had his mouth open, but stopped himself in time. They were telling stories Tibs had already heard them talk about again, as if it had just happened. He snapped awake to a cry of excitement. He'd fallen asleep to their jabbering? Or had he imagined he was sleeping? Someone didn't feel any more awake. He shambled to the other room, looked at the varying height of the tiles there and closed the door. He was in no condition to deal with this. He sat, closed his eyes, and had to listen to them. He banged his head against the wall, hoping the pain would somehow cover their voice. He did it until he felt wetness down his back, sensing Sensing, he noticed his broken skin and wrapped essence over it, cursing. He didn't even notice he'd hurt himself, too busy talking about a sorcerer who had read from a book as he proceeded through a room on the 7th floor, instead of looking around and dealing with the challenges. The 3rd room had killed him. Once Val absorbed the book, she found it was something about mathematical equation instead of about her. They laughed loudly at the sorcerer's insanity. Will you two shut up? Tibs yelled at the ceiling. The silence that followed was profound, and Tibs closed his eyes, finally. He can't have said that, Karen said fearfully. He groaned as he realized he had said it out loud. Maybe he's insane too, and imagining someone's talking? Val offered, her tone thoughtful. Wish. Tibs grumbled. He tried to enjoy the ensuing silence, but the idea it would break kept him from relaxing. These two just couldn't stop. So they would. Hello? Val said tentatively. Isn't it kind of late for that? Tibs said with a sigh. I've been here a while now. That's what you say when someone arrives, but you were too busy gawking at my essence to say anything then. So how about you shut up now and let me sleep? And take away the food. I'm not going to eat it. Well, aren't you bossy for a human trapped in a dungeon? Karen said haughtily. I'm fucking tired because you two never shut up. So forgive if my manners aren't up to your fucking standard. And what is it with you and recounting everything that happened before? Go watch the others and stuff instead and leave me alone. You can't hear us, Val said with determination. Tibs let his head fall forward. You have no idea how much I wish that was true. Stowe never yammers like you do. Who's Stowe? Karen asked. Don't encourage him, Val chastised. He's my dungeon. Your dungeon? Val demanded. No one owns us. Sorry. Tibs waved his hand, hoping that would quiet her down. He's my friend, and he happens to be a dungeon like you. I saved his life. Karen Sorkin. Yeah, sure. Actually, this is. Oh, sure. A human saving a dungeon, like that ever happened. He shrugged. Look, is it too much to ask for some silence? I just want to sleep and get through everything you have planned to and be done. Why are you here? Val demanded. Tibs sighed. No, he wasn't getting his silence. You worked out why I'm here pretty quickly. You know which one I'm missing. What are you after? Karen asked. Why do you want another element? You're just a greedy rogue. Tibs snickered and she huffed. You think this is funny? Val, why don't you bring a bunch of creatures to that room he needs to go through next? You can bring creatures from a low floor here? What if I can? Val asked. What? You don't have a don't have a what? Don't have a dungeon you can ask? Karen said mockingly. Stowe's working on his 3rd floor, and it never came up. He also never threatened to change the floor I'm already on. He chuckled. Then again, his 1st floor's tougher than yours, even if it isn't this large. This floor isn't about killing supplicant, Val replied, offended. I test them. I make sure they have the determination needed and are worthy of to have their audience. Tibs smiled. How do I rate? Too well, Val said bitterly. Look, I'm not asking that you make things any easier on me than you do on the others. I understand what you're about. Again, he explained it to me. You're pushing me to be better. Like you said, you test us. If we fail, we might die. Except that you're cheating, Karen said. I was? Tibs corrected. You make sure I don't have much to work with. You still have all that essence. He snapped, not letting you have the audience, Val stated. Do you think you're the first person to come here and try to lie and cheat their way to an audience? I'm not lying. You're a rogue, Karen said. That's all you do. I'm a roof runner, Tibs said with pride in a pickpocket. I lied to get in, but I've done everything else according to the rules. The rules say you can't use essence, Karen said. I don't think so, Tibs replied. I've gone through Stowe's 1st floor while having essence. A lot of us got our element before his 2nd floor was ready. It didn't help. Anyone survived. Felt something on his cheek and was surprised to wipe away tears. A lot of friends to him. And you're saying you are friends? Karen asked. No, demanded. She didn't like Tibs calling Sto his friend. I was angry at first, and I thought he just wanted to eat us. That was before I could hear him. You couldn't always hear us? Val asked. He shook his head. I didn't even know I could hear another dungeon until I came here. You're just the second dungeon I've been into that I've met. What happened to make you hear him? I had 4 audience, Tibs said, with only a slight hesitation. He was in no state to manage anything believable, and who would Val and Karen tell? Water was first. She told me to get the others, then earth, fire, and air. That's when I heard them for the first time. Well, that's when I was able to understand them. I'm pretty sure I sort of heard something before that. So you decided that if four let you talk to a dungeon, more would let you control us? Val was suspicious again. Water said I needed to get the next 4. You just said she sent you after the first 4, Karen replied. That was the first audience. On my second with her, she told me about getting these. My essence got corrupted as part of saving Sto, and it wouldn't go away, so I went to Water, hoping she'd remove it. She said to ask corruption when I had my audience as part of getting light, darkness, purity, and corruption. But you went to corruption before us? Karen demanded. You aren't easy to reach, he replied, and there's a pool of it in my town. I was in pain, angry, and done with having people laugh at me, so I threw myself in. So throwing myself in it was easier than that. So you want me to believe you aren't trying to control us? Val asked, the suspicion still loud. Why would I want that? Power? What else? You're corrupt. That's what you're after. I think you're sort of listening to the clerics too much. You have to know the elements aren't like they're saying. Corruption is needed. I don't know why, but if he wasn't, he wouldn't be an element, right? When they didn't reply, Tibs closed his eyes and hoped that, fine, Val said. You know more than the usual supplicant. Thank you. Can I sleep now? Leave. Just get up and get out. I'm going to let you do that. If you keep going, I'm going to make sure you fail. Tibs sighed. Hopefully, being so tired wouldn't lead to a fatal mistake. He'd just have to take it slow. At least Karina wouldn't wait for him indefinitely. Once the bracelet changed, she'd return to Craggle Rock. If he wasn't there by then, it would mean he hadn't survived. I guess we both have to do what we feel is right. No more using your essence, Karen said. That isn't how this works, Tibs replied. I'm going to use every tool I have so I can survive, and you're going to make it as hard as you can for me to do so. Enemies don't make deals. Is that what we are? Val asked, sounding slightly disappointed. I'm too tired to think of a better word. I don't want you dead. I just don't plan on letting you kill me. You can't stop us, Karen said. I'm not looking to kill anyone, Val said. That isn't what I'm about. Paused and sounded sad. But my challenges can kill you. I know, Tibs yawned. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to try to sleep. So go back to talking on yourselves. He closed his eyes and it felt to him like the next second of silence and an offended feeling to him. Then Karen and Val were talking loudly. And this concludes chapter 60 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, please hit the like button. If you want to know when the next one is going to be, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story, it is available on Royal Road for free. If you want to support me and read ahead of the story, that is on my Patreon. And should you want to watch me do these live, it's on Twitch every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. The links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.